Okay, to talk about all of this now, we've got Bobby Chacon, former FBI special agent and attorney, and also Neama Rahmani. She's a former federal prosecutor in California. He is a former federal prosecutor. Nice to see you both. Bobby, I want to start with you. I mean, 2009 took all of this time. They didn't believe the victims initially in 2015, but now we find out previous cases in 2009. What was the issue here, Bobby?
Well, the first issue was that it was such a bizarre crime that the initial reaction of the detectives was it must be a hoax. And so they went down that road far too long, and they didn't test it against the evidence. But they had certain reasons to believe that it might have been a hoax because the wetsuits and the sedation, all of these things are very rare. We don't see them often, and so I think they did have cause to kind of go down that road, but I think that the mistake was they kept on that road beyond what the evidence was showing.
Do we know, Neama, why it took so long and how they ended up eventually connecting him to these crimes from 2009? And then also, as a former prosecutor, is it difficult prosecuting something now that's 15 years old?
Brian, I got to tell you, Muller went to Harvard Law School a few years after me, and he's one of the most infamous graduates of the school. And I don't know why it took so long. And frankly, as a prosecutor, you have someone that has shown the same MO. They're breaking into a residential home in the middle of the night and forcing an individual to consume NyQuil or some sort of liquid. So the pattern's there. It's in Northern California. Frankly, they should have connected the dots a lot earlier. Now, law enforcement is saying that, the DNA evidence has advanced since then and they were unable to conduct these tests. But given the failure of the 2015 case, I mean, better late than never, but this is really a disappointing result, especially for the victims in this case, Brian.
Yeah, and you made the point. I mean, Harvard grad, Matthew Muller, very, very smart guy. Do you think, Neama, that he'll fess up? I mean, obviously they're going to go and try to talk to him now in prison. He's got 40 years, didn't get life, but a long time. I mean, could they make some kind of deal with him? How do you think that part of it plays out?
I think he will enter into some sort of plea based on how he handled the previous case. He did plea in that case, still got 40 years, but obviously the DNA is going to put him at the scene. You're going to have the prior bad acts evidence. They're going to bring in evidence of this other crime to show that this is how he commits crimes. And I think jurors are going to have a tough time voting not guilty in a case like this when you have a convicted felon and rapist, and now he's being charged with attempted rape in these two other cases, really the same exact pattern. So very difficult case to defend on the merits, and given how he handled his first case, I expect a plea in this one as well.
Yeah, you'd have to imagine they've been looking at the similarities for quite some time because they are so similar and they're in such a close area, the proximity. They must have just gotten some kind of DNA evidence or something to seal the deal. Bobby, the victim in the Gone Girl case has now reacted to these new charges. She said, "What needs to happen to any woman for them to be believed?" And I mean, you watch the Netflix special, Bobby, it seems like a good point. I mean, the frustration that these people felt not being believed. Will this be a wake-up call?
Well, you would hope so. And I watched that Netflix special, and I probably, like most people, were led down the road of the hoax first, and then then you had the dramatic turn, and you're like, oh my God, they're telling the truth. And you need, I think, supervision. Detectives tend to sometimes get tunnel vision. We're invested in our own investigation, but you need that second layer of supervision that's overlooking you and not looking at the investigation, but looking at the other things. You need somebody to come in and play the devil's advocate and say, well, what about this? What about this possibility? And you have to look at all possibilities, as if they could be true, and you can't get that tunnel vision. And so, even the couple in this case, and they're, I think, God bless them, they're doing the right thing. They're not really slamming the police. They're just saying we want some accountability so that this doesn't happen to the next person. And so far, I don't think there's been much accountability in this case. But I think that the police have to look at their methods, and they have to look at how this can be prevented in the future.
I do kind of wonder, Neama, going into 2025, you look at this case, more charges, victims now being believed. John Bonet case has now got a whole new level of attention, and police say they're going to start investigating again there. Menendez brothers, big developments there. I mean, will this be a year, Neama, where you think some of these older cases we may see more progress, people who weren't always believed now getting a shot to be listened to?
I do. First, Bobby's absolutely right about the confirmation bias. It's a big issue with law enforcement, something defense lawyers raise all the time. But you talked about it, Brian, the power of a Netflix series. It can dramatically change the course of a criminal case. We've seen it time and time again, obviously with the Menendez brothers, but we've seen documentaries break open cold cases, right? Surviving R. Kelly. R. Kelly's finally brought to justice. Bob Durst, one of the biggest cold cases in American history. It was the HBO documentary, The Jinx. And of course, John Benet Ramsey. That's something that folks have been following for decades. So I hope for the sake of the family that we can finally get some closure in that case. But really, I tip my hat and credit both reporters and folks who are producing these documentaries because it has significantly helped law enforcement in certain cases.
Yeah, the impact really, really is amazing. We'll see how it plays out here. Bobby, Neama, thank you so much for coming on, and Happy New Year.